Hello there. It's been a while. Yeah, I basically came in, promised a big game, then dipped. Life happened and such, but I still plan to deliver a version this late. Like, come on, it's Ark of Krypton. Obviously I'm not just gonna talk about that battle forever, unless you wanna hear my pitch for Goku vs Superman 3. No, but seriously, in case you missed what I'm proud to call my most successful video so far, I'm basically doing a series covering and debunking the many criticisms surrounding Zack Snyder's iteration of Superman, as he appears in Man of Steel, Batman v Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League. In that same video I brought up the idea of the Super Superman. Basically what many detractors see as the true Superman and what Zack Snyder allegedly failed to capture. If this sounds like religious gatekeeping to ya, oh, just you wait. Between exaggerations, hyperboles and just generally head-scratching nonsense, there's many myths surrounding this take on the Earth's greatest champ, including the one I was gonna cover next. But I piled up so much material, it stopped being durable, at least for the time being. So instead we'll focus on what I like to call the Clark State effect, aka the criticism that Zack Snyder's Superman has no personality, no agency as an overall person, and for good measure, no character arc whatsoever. Now, if you take into account what each of these notions actually mean, you'd be left with a character full of nothing inside, who doesn't change in any way, and with no will of its own. You will then realize that you're essentially describing an object, a statue. That alone is such a ridiculous notion you think people realize right away how overblown it is, but you'll be surprised. So let's strap in and let's get into it. Remember to like, subscribe and turn on the notification for more.
Now, what is a personality? The answer we get right away from the web is, quote, the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual distinctive character. So what are the characteristics that make up this Clark Joe? We will now delve into them in order, with the help of a Tumblr post by A Social Justice, whom I thank very much for the permission. Firstly, the most defined character trait that serves as a root for all criticism of this video. This Clark is quiet, reserved, speaks only when he has something to say, and even then it's short sentences, and generally listens way more than he talks or starts conversation, in great part due to how much he values other people's thoughts. Despite the claims of alleged sacrilege toward the source material, this fits perfectly with the most commonly used adjective to describe Clark Kent in the comics, mild-mannered, aka not given to the extremes of emotion. This does not mean that Clark lacks emotions, they're there, right? Just on a lower volume. Reasons for introversion in real life can vary from nature to nurture, but in Clark's case, who lives in a setting that doesn't necessarily show how growing up as an alien won't exactly be easy peasy, we're shown that being subject to bullying, feeling isolated, different and alone, wouldn't exactly create a social butterfly. He will help out, but afterwards he just wants to go home, you know? My favorite type of character, by the way. But unfortunately, in the landscape we've been in, where people define characters by how much creeps they make, how much memes they can spout, and how much exposition they can deliver, this turned off a lot of people, because God forbid we have one introverted headliner in a mainstream genre full of extroverted comedians. God forbid! I still find this take so refreshing for this exact reason. He doesn't need to talk non-stop to express his emotions, thoughts or feelings. But he doesn't shout into the world either, leading to some people to fill up that gap with the worst kind of negative attributes possible. This totally never happened to me, by the way. I always lived a life where people painted me in a completely accurate fashion and understood my reserved nature without filling the blanks with bad faith. Anyway, putting the character in a more realistic setting isn't just about adding shockwaves whenever he flies. We're talking about a Clark clearly afflicted by social anxiety, self-conscious issues, and quite possibly depression. Which, by the way, makes what he does more inspiring, not less. Fucking morons. Now, is he stoic? Is he detached? Well, stoic points towards not showing feelings, which again, this Clark does, just on a lower volume. My perfect idea of a character that fits the stoic label is our converse Batman. It works for the character and rest in peace to Conway, don't get me wrong, but goddamn there's pretty much never a tonal shift and variation whenever he talks. And again, Clark's emotional sensitivity kinda makes it a bit of a logical impossibility to apply detach in any sincere fashion. While there are emotions within Clark that he would want to unleash, as he often does in outbursts expected from someone with a lifetime of restrained emotional baggage. Given his sheer power difference between him and what's around him, like, people, he doesn't normally want to get anyone hurt, even if he wanted to. This is a perfect segue to our next point, which is arguably the most essential Superman trait.
You okay?
With kindness being defined as the quality of being friendly and generous, Clark embodies these traits in these very first scenes, with his adult self rescuing a group of old rig workers that would have been otherwise left for dead, and his younger self saving his classmates from drowning, including his own bully. This establishes that Clark's own personal biases play very little in how much he's willing to help others, as he's shown rescuing allies, strangers, and enemies alike, with rarely any, if not zero, regard for his personal stability, either figuratively or physically speaking. Bully him, he will save you from drowning. Shoot at him, he will save you from falling. Kill his father, he will be reluctant about killing you and will warn you. Kidnap his mother, throw his girlfriend, ruin his life, he will save you. Whether we're talking about Kid Clark, Wanderer Clark, Superhero Clark, or Journalist Clark, there's always this threat of being unable to stand by if others need help, one that Lois very much hangs on to.
The only way you could disappear for good is to stop helping people altogether, and I sense that's not an option for you.
Helping him discover Superman's identity technically before Superman is even a thing. I don't see Lois Lane do that, I'm just saying. This one second trait opens in an umbrella of other traits. But let's first get into the third one, which works as a perfect middle ground between the two we just covered. Despite having the power to pretty much turn the entire world upside down, Clark never sees himself as any better or superior because of it. His first reaction when finding out he was an alien?
Can I just keep pretending I'm your son?
You are my son.
He lets himself be handcuffed so that soldiers feel safer around him. He accepts being judged for a crime he didn't commit just to give people answers. This moment also features a scene that's as beautiful as it is underrated, where this absolute mountain of muscles slowly opens and closes doors in front of him instead of flying over it, and patiently waits for it to be addressed before talking. Do you see this man? He took on various blue-collar jobs, constantly uses normal transportation methods even after unlocking flight, drinks beer while watching sports, buys Lois a wedding ring that's almost as simple yet beautiful as he is, goes to church and takes a priest's advice, apologizes to someone he dislikes, uses who would be less bad to beg for a life other than his, tries to work within the system to help people instead of trampling over their rights like Batman does, and he is not happy with being perceived as a godlike being. For all intents and purposes, this Clark doesn't just care for individuals, he sees himself as one. And for all this obsessive talk about, oh but he's just a normal guy, he's a kid from Kansas, that's what this film show you, dumbass, it's literally just that. But no, he's not making speeches about it, so it doesn't work, I guess. For many people, Clark is not being humble unless he directly says it to the audience. But what these films do is show how humble Clark is, rather than telling. Meaning it's up to the viewers to pick up these clues, instead of being picked up themselves by the end. Whenever Clark does talk and he's not feeling particularly angry or sassy, Clark is nothing but respectful and polite towards anyone he meets. Again, contrasting how the true villainess is antagonized by in BVS generally treat others, especially women. He respects Lois's boundaries and wishes, even asking consent before saving a freaking life, or the general permission before flying off to save the freaking planet. Clark was ready to risk his anonymity both as a child and as an adult if it meant saving others, his life when fighting against hostile Kryptonian forces and their devices, and his mental health by keeping on being Superman even if it meant living in constant scrutiny, and arguably risks his life twice again as he was ready to take on a nuke to the face and die from kryptonite exposure if it meant getting rid of Doomsday. Clark is self-sacrificing for everything he believes to be right, putting his feelings aside, whether it's love for his father or disdain for bullies. He technically had no way of knowing if he'd survived the All-Rig explosion or the kryptonite after effects either. Superman chose a human family he didn't know over someone for his own planet, something he's been searching his whole adult life for, and when it became apparent that Zod would never listen to reason, he killed him even if it meant sacrificing less connection to Krypton.
If I don't cauterize this bleed.
Granted, being the product of his own world's greatest chief scientist deciding to do it like they do in the Discovery Channel probably helped in the genetic dice toss, But this Clark is shown reading freaking Greek philosophy as a kid, had an interest in science, and also to treat a wound despite traveling around the world. And much like 95% of his counterparts, he ultimately goes for a job where his powers hold no physical advantage. Philosophically speaking, Clark is very much involved in the intellectual conversation surrounding Superman's role on Earth, the consequences of his action, how the justice system works, and how the press can hurt people, using his pen rather than punches. Then when they lead to unintended consequences, he takes that very seriously and tries to hear the stories of those affected. When there are public debates about his role in the world, he thinks very deeply about what they are saying, seeks counsel from people he trusts. The news aren't calling him evil. They question the impact of his overreaction and existence towards the perception of humanity. It's not about whether he's being praised or degraded, it's whether he should be taking action at all, and how. Clark is deeply invested in these questions, but he's also unsure of himself. He's not looking for praise, but okay, what do you want me to do? What's the problem? And the media is like, your existence, Lamau, to which Clark's like, well, I can't fucking fix that, can I? On top of his first scene presenting Clark's main character traits in both his quiet nature and immediate sense of altruism, the actual best thing we see Clark Kent doing is, funnily enough, being saved by someone else, a human, who calls him a greenhorn, another word for newbie, something that fits this Clark to a T in general. Since he had no neurally implanted Superman tutorial ingrained in his mind to show how to do what, he's very inexperienced and prone to make mistakes, which is realistically bound to happen when you put a foreign boy into what's essentially a war zone. We're talking about a man who literally never threw a punch in his whole life, and is put against people from the Warrior Guild of Krypton. The film is sincere enough to show that just because, quote, he is Superman, that does not translate into him magically having experience he never had, such as being able to fight or use his powers effectively. Bless him for his attempts, but this Clark does not really have much in his strategy department outside of smashing superhuman foes at Mach 5. And when that is not an option, he pretty much gets curb stomped by superior fighters like the military leader Zod or the martial artist Bruce. He stumbles, he falls, but as we went over, he gets back up. In his poor attempts at emotional projection, Bruce says that Clark's invulnerability means he's never had to be brave for anything, when in actuality, as we went over, reality paints a much more complex picture, one where Clark faces a lot of emotional hardships, yet he marches through them with determination and self-sacrifice, regardless of odds or how scared he is. Because courage is being brave in face of fear, not never being afraid. A good boy taught me as much. Through sheer willpower, the Superman never backs down in the face of sheer numbers, kryptonite poisoning, or the possibility of early death. He takes traumatizing events that destabilize him considerably, and a cosmic formula to erase his will entirely. He never gives up in trying to find his people, ultimately decides to not give up on being Superman after having his all tested for the whole film, and he decides to serve up enough to save the world barely after fully recalling for his post-resurrection confusion. On the flip side though, it can get rather headstrong and biased, most clearly shown in how he first sees Bruce as a bully and nothing more for most of the movie to his own detriment. But what these films emphasize is that being Superman is something Clark chooses to do, constantly. When his mom reminds him of the possibility of him quitting and saving himself a lot of pain and suffering, to be honest, he still chooses to keep on going and save humanity. Being Superman is shown as being a burden too, but not simply because of helping others, but everything around it, such as being seen as either God or Satan, having his very existence scrutinized, every act being met with unforeseen negative consequences, and so forth. If you ask me, a Clark who keeps being Superman in these conditions is much more meaningful than one who is just loved by all anyway.
Where is she? I don't know! I would not let them tell me! Now
Having lived a rather lonely life, Clark's circle of loved ones isn't as expansive as other more socially lucky iterations, or well, himself later on, and while he generally is very protective towards people in general,
Get inside. It's not safe.
there's a certain button that gets pressed whenever his loved ones are in danger, as it happens unfortunately often, since the greatest weakness of someone who's bulletproof are the loved ones who aren't. His emotional circuitry goes full AY whenever either his fiancée or his mom's life are on the line, a character trait Alexa exploits in a double whammy by kidnapping Lois for attention and kidnapping Martha for blackmail. Yet Clark's response to that was ultimately saving his life, Remember, this is a Superman made by someone who apparently is the character. In a pub filled with people, a barman and soldiers, no one stepped up to defend Christie from being arrested. But Clark does. And instead of making it about Clark, both him and the scene keep it about her, as he backs down when she asks to do so. You protect, you attack, but most importantly, you don't get your truck back.
Did it hurt you?
You know they can't.
It's not what I meant. I meant, are you all right?
Man of Steel may be, Heart of Steel similarly as not. This Clark is very easily emotionally hurt, and what many twist into him being quote brooding is just a natural response when you put a character who cares for everyone and everything in situations where everything goes wrong, constantly. He's like a living exposed nerve. People hurt him and his loved one check up on him, protecting him emotionally as much as he does physically to them. He looks visibly sick with just the idea of having to kill Bruce to save his mother. One of the most hilarious criticism is this idea of Clark being quote apathetic, even compared to the ever blue in color and mood Dr. fucking Manhattan. Mind you, that character ultimately retired on Mars. This Clark give up his life to save Earth. You do the math. If he was apathetic, he wouldn't give two shits about what people say about him, or let events like the death of his father, killing Zod, or the Capitol bombing affect him as much as they do. Every protest, every act of violence, every action against his loved ones, but also every tragedy fails to prevent, all leads him right in the art. We see that throughout the movie, and we should empathize with him, even though he keeps most of it internal rather than talk about it at length. Keep this in mind for later. He wonders if his attempts to help the world are actually for the ultimate good, because people are telling him to stop and there always seem to be unintended consequences. After the Capitol bombing, his heart is broken and he blames himself for his tragedy. He finally believes his naysayers, that he is dangerous. Everyone got hurt because of him. Despite the disturbing takes I've seen regarding his expression here, he's shaking his head because he thought he could have stopped it, refusing to look at the corner where it all came from, tearing up even. Every single person was there because of him, to see and hear his stance on things. And he even felt everyone around him dying in a split second. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that frozen shock would be that much of a wide reaction for anyone here, let alone someone as sensitive as him.
Hey, I was gonna cook. Surprise you.
This man brings flowers and plans to make a surprise dinner with a girl he already lives with.
Just gonna cook. Surprise you.
Enough said.
Clark decides to check that box too. There's the aforementioned respect he has for pretty much everyone, the way he treats Lois, and most notably of all, he's just one big mama's boy. His reaction after finding out his origins?
I found him.
Tell his mom. His reaction after the enemy fled the scene after attacking her?
Mom?
I'm all right. It's only stuff, Clark. It can always be replaced.
But you can't be.
The Capitol asking for him to show up?
But they see what you do, and they know who you are.
Trouble sleeping?
Hi.
Hi.
Just pay attention to how comfortable he is with physical affection with his loved ones, and holding and hugging and all that stuff. The idea goes as follows. Since Clark isn't shown chatting with strangers about the weather, like the character does in settings where he is seen as a friend that everyone could chat with, but he is shown to be very warm with his loved ones, then that apparently means he's a cold bastard who only cares for the people closest to him. Truth is, much like the DCAU Superman, he's just much warmer and happier when he's with his loved ones than when he is Superman saving the planet, because he can just relax and be himself in the former. Or another way to put it,
Oh, Superman is what I can do. Clark is who I am.
and even then, as Superman, Ian tries to be that kind of friend that wants to help when he's rescuing the girl from the fire, but there's this huge disconnect because the crowd only sees him as a being to be worshipped, which upsets him greatly because that's not what he wants to be seen as. He also smiles warmly at the waitress, is filled with joy during the first flight, he comforts Lois while saving her, who, mind you, is a stranger to him at this point in the story, even holding her hand and soothingly telling her everything will be okay, but also sincerely admitting it'll hurt to cauterize her wounds. When he saves the lady in the bar, he approaches the abuser in a kindly manner as not to escalate things. When he saves a soldier from falling to his death, he asks if he's okay. When he's being interrogated, he comes across as very trusting and polite, and is even a little playful with the military. Before he flies off to the world engine, he asks Lois to take a step back, twice, and is very endearing with his second response.
Maybe a little bit more.
While he does have quote warmer moments in Man of Steel, in Batman v Superman he's faced with a lot of challenges, and thus the priority isn't really to have him, you know, be lighthearted. As much as I think like all series has to be happy, but not all stories are about look how happy this guy is. But this idea of this Clark being some kind of cold or detached bastard incapable of warmth is simply non-existent in the actual films.
I grew up in Kansas, General. About as American as it gets.
On top of being a sweetheart, and whenever his confidence isn't being literally blown to pieces, Clark can get surprisingly sassy towards others. Here's a compilation.
Did you find the spear?
I've been a little busy.
How do we know you won't one day act against America's interests?
I grew up in Kansas, General. About as American as it gets.
You think I'll fight him for you?
You let them handcuff you?
Wouldn't be much of a surrender if I resisted.
Are you effing stupid?
It's one of your surveillance drones.
That's a $12 million piece of hardware.
It was.
She's safe on the ground. How about you?
My parents taught me to hone my senses on. Focus on just what I wanted to see. Without your helmet, you're getting everything. And it hurts. Doesn't it?
Not impressed.
Carrying some kind of alien pathogen.
Been here for 33 years, Doctor. Haven't infected anyone yet.
What makes you think they'd listen?
I don't know, General. Guess I'll just have to trust you.
Granted, pretty much every single one of these instances is followed by him getting his ass kicked. He is just like me, for real. Still, for a character afflicted with so much insecurity, these are the most notable instances of confidence that he displays, which are important to contrast the people who say someone is a flat portrayal of the character. Being confident in certain instances over others is simply, well, a very human thing to do after all.
Police won't help. The press has to do the right thing.
You don't get to decide what the right thing is.
When the planet was founded, it stood for something, Perry.
Despite being the #1 thing this Clark is accused of not being, because again, apparently everything must be spelled out, or otherwise it doesn't exist, apparently this Clark being said means that he's a pessimist, or a cynic even. I fear for how these people treat their and other people's emotion in real life, but I digress. This Clark has a core set of values he believes in, stuff worth fighting for, better tomorrow.
Did you file the football yet?
Why aren't we covering this? Poor people don't buy papers?
People don't buy papers, period, Kent.
Perry, when you assign a story, you're making a choice about who matters and who's worth it.
Good morning, USA!
This is why he's so actively against bullies, against innocent people's suffering. This is why he never suspected anyone who bombed the Capitol.
I didn't see it, Lo. Standing right there and I didn't see it.
Clark, there are people behind this.
I'm afraid I didn't see it because I wasn't looking.
The whole reason Clark dislikes Batman until the end is because he sees him as a violent bully who does nothing but put the class of Gotham in harm's way.
I told you not to pursue.
The police won't help. The press has to do the right thing.
You don't get to decide what the right thing is.
When the planet was founded, it stood for something, Perry.
And so could you if it was 1938, but it's not 1938.
Just because he's not making quips and speeches about truth and justice, that does not mean he's not fighting for those values. And just because he has a positive outlook on things, that does not mean he's obligated to constantly be happy and joyful to show it. You don't go through all the stuff he does without having a strong dose of optimism in your heart.
This is my world.
No, Clark, don't.
You are my world.
And there you have it. The personality shown by this Clark/Superman throughout all three films. Some adjectives may overlap or might even sound like different ways of conveying the same sentiment, but like, that's just who Clark Kent is as a character 99% of the time. Good, simple. If it sounds like a generic superhero personality, well, where do you think all superheroes got it from? This Clark being quieter and more reserved does not betray anything about the character's core values of kindness and optimism. Him not openly expressing how much he loves helping people does not equal to him disliking it, and him not stopping to chat with civilians after saving people sure as hell does not mean he hates the mere idea of being comforting. I think this is a very important issue to address in terms of both toxic positivity, misconception on introverts, and flawed media assessments are for a nuanced character portrayal score. I can only hope for things like this to get better. After all, that's what an optimist does. Well, that's out of the way. Next time I'm probably gonna talk about another Superman character other than Clark himself, hopefully not a year from now, but until then I'm Mark of Krypton and I hope I made your day slightly better.